Design 1. So we're going to talk about our very first Illustrator project, which is to learn how to use simple shapes. We're going to be creating a rocket. So I will tell you exactly what to do. First thing is that if you're in my classroom or if you're working at home, that you want to open the Adobe Creative Cloud. So when you do that, it's going to look like this. I am already logged in. So if I click on this little account button over here, you'll see that I'm logged in with my CNUSD email address. You will do the same. So when it asks you to log in, you're going to put in your CNUSD email address and use your school password that you use to get onto the computer. And then you will have access to the Creative Cloud. Once you're here, you are then going to go to your work in the upper left-hand corner. In your work, you're then going to look for a tab that looks like a little page. It'll say Cloud Documents. On Cloud Documents, you're going to make a folder that is for your period. So in order to do that, you're going to click on this little blue plus sign. You're going to create a new folder. That new folder will be your period number and then graphic design. And we will create all of our artwork and save it in that folder in the cloud. So you'll say save, and then you'll have to open that folder. And then once you're inside of that folder, you're going to click that plus sign again, and you're going to open Illustrator. While Illustrator is loading, I want to remind you that Illustrator is a vector-based program. So that means that the vectors are created by making points. Those points are more like your computer doing math to figure out where the point should always be. So when you make your artwork larger or smaller, it will not get blurry because the pixels stay there are no pixels because the points stay the same. As opposed to pixels, if we were working in a pixel-based program, when you zoom in, it gets blurry because there aren't enough pixels to support how far you're zooming in. All right, now that we're here, we're going to create new. We're going to make it for print. And we're going to change this from points. Like I said, we're creating points when we make things in Illustrator, but we're going to change it from points to inches. And then you're going to tell it how big you want the document to be. I want yours to be 10 by 10 for this particular assignment. So once we've done 10 by 10, we're going to scroll down and look for the Create button. I'm going to press Create. And then you make a lovely document that is square. It's 10 by 10 inches. So now I'm going to get my shapes. So over here on my toolbar, I'm going to look for my rectangle tool. There's lots of tools underneath that rectangle tool. So if you click and hold on to it, and then click on the arrow that's at the edge of that tool, then you get a pop out where you can see all of your shapes all of the time. So using the square tool, I'm going to click once. And I'm going to make this square the same size as my background. So that means that I need to make it 10 by 10. And then I'm going to press OK. Now that I have my square, if I don't want to exit my square tool, I'm going to look for this blue dot in the center. When I hover my mouse over that blue dot, it turns into my selection tool. So now I can move it so that it's centered on my artboard. That white space that you can create art in is called an artboard. Now that it's here, I'm going to change the background to be a darker color, so that way it will be like the sky for my rocket. And then I'm going to work in my gray space. So there's our artboard, and then there's gray space. Everything that's in this gray space is not going to be included in the final artwork. It's just empty space that you can work in, that after you create something, you can then drag it onto your artwork space. All right, so in order to move my screen so that I can see that gray space, I'm holding the space bar on my keyboard and clicking and dragging with my mouse. Now that I've moved to the side, I'm still going to use that square tool, and I'm going to make a square that looks kind of like this. This is going to be the body of my spaceship. I'm going to change the colors so that way it stands out against my background. The fill is the inside color. The stroke is the outline color. So now that I have the correct colors, I'm then going to make the points be larger. Are about 6 or 7 points for your stroke. Then we're going to make another square directly in the middle of that first one. So this time I'm clicking and dragging in the center here. And in order to make that square stand out, I'm going to change the fill and the stroke. I'm just going to switch them. So if I click over here on this arrow, it will swap the fill and the stroke. If I don't want to have to click somewhere, I can use the hotkey Shift X, and that does the same thing. So Shift X will do the same thing. Now I want my door to look more futuristic, so I'm going to curve the edges by clicking on this little circle right here and dragging in. So you can do that until you like the way that your shape looks. The next shape that I'm going to make is going to be an ellipse or a circle. So I'm going to come up here to my ellipse tool. Then I'm going to let my mouse show me some guidelines. So you'll see if I find the center of the shape, a pink highlighted guideline shows up. So I'm going to look for that. And then I'm going to click and drag to make my circle. However, it comes out from the corner, right? I don't want it to come out from the corner. I want it to come out from the middle. So I'm going to hold Shift, which will make my square, my circle, a perfect circle. I'm also going to hold Alt, so that way it comes out from the middle of where I clicked instead of from the corner. So now that I have my circle in the center, again, I'm going to switch my fill and my stroke so that it looks more like a window. So I'm going to do Shift X, and that will change that for me. I'm going to zoom in by holding Alt and scrolling with my mouse. And now I'm going to make some circles that will act as the bolts that go around my window. So again, I'm going to click and drag while holding Shift and Alt to make a circle that comes out from the center. Again, I would like to switch my fill and my stroke. So again, I will press Shift X. And now I've got a circle that I want to duplicate. I don't want to make a whole bunch of circles manually. I want to work smarter, not harder. So I'm going to get to my selection tool, which is up here on my keyboard, on my toolbar. It's also just the V on your keyboard. So if you press V on your keyboard, you will get to the selection tool. So in my selection tool, if I hold Alt, you're going to notice that my selection tool doubles. That means that I'm going to make a copy of my shape. So I'm holding Alt on my keyboard, and now I'm going to drag, and I need to let go of my mouse first, so that way I can make a new shape. So once I've made a new shape, then I can do Control D on my keyboard, and it will duplicate the action that I just made. So now that I have a whole bunch of circles, I can move those around to look like they're bolts on my window. If I run out of circles, I can duplicate them again. So again, I would hold Alt, look for my mouse to be a double, and then click and drag, and I'm going to let go of my mouse first. And then to duplicate that action, I'm going to do Control D, and now I can move those circles where I would like them to be. Again, you can use those hot pink guidelines to help you out. All right, so now I'm going to make the triangle, which will be the top, but you'll notice I don't have a triangle tool. So I'm going to click on the star tool, then I'm going to click and drag, and you'll notice I get a 5-pointed star. I want to press the down arrow on my keyboard, so that way I get a triangle. If you press the up arrow, it adds more. If you press the down arrow, it takes away. I'm also going to hold Shift, so that way the bottom of the triangle stays flat. And then once I like the shape, I can let go. And I'm going to move this fancy triangle using my selection tool. So the V as in Victor on my keyboard, scoot that guy over. So I'm almost done with this. The next thing I'm going to do is my ellipse tool. So I'm going to click on my circle tool. I'm going to click and drag, and this time make an elongated ellipse instead of a perfect circle. So make it about this big. Again, I'm going to switch my fill and my stroke. So I'm going to do Shift X. And then I'm going to move this using my selection tool. So that's the V on my keyboard. And in order to rotate something, you need to go to the corner and hover your mouse on the corner until you see the arrows that point in multiple directions. Then I'm going to rotate it a little bit. And again, I want to work smarter and not harder. So I'm going to right-click, transform, and reflect instead of having to make a whole new shape. So I'm going to reflect, and then I'm going to make sure it says vertical, and I'm going to also make sure I press copy. That will give me a copy of that shape that's exactly the same. And then I need another third one in the middle. So I'm going to, again, click and drag while holding Alt, and then rotate by going to the corner. And now I have a problem that my shape is in front of my door, and I want it to be behind the door. So I'm going to right-click again, arrange, and send to the back. And now it's behind. So in order to move this where it's on my artboard and I don't move just one piece at a time, I'm going to click and drag a square over everything. And then I'm going to look for this button on my properties that says group. If you want to do that with your keyboard, you can do Control G and it will do the same thing. So now I'm going to move my rocket over here, and it's too big. So now I need to rotate it and also make it a little smaller. But if I make it smaller, it's easy to squish the dimensions. So if I don't like that, I can do Control Z and it'll go back to normal. And then when I change the size, I want to hold the Shift on my keyboard so that way the size doesn't get distorted. All right, and now I want to add some stuff to my background. When I do that, I'm going to have some of my items go off of the edge. So that way I can see what happens when I put stuff off of the artboard, right? So you guys can add whatever it is that you'd like to add to the background, whether that's planets or stars or spacemen or aliens, whatever it is that you want to do, whatever makes your heart happy, go for it. So I'm just going to put a couple off the edges. You will be doing more than that. But let's say I wanted to add something to this group without moving it off of my artboard. What I would do is use isolation mode, right? So I'm going to click on this circle, but I'm going to double click. And then you'll notice that everything that's around the group that I've isolated turns gray. This is really helpful for when you're working in groups and you need to add or move something. So now that I'm in this group, I could move individual pieces of it, or I could add to the group. So if I double click again on this circle, now I've just isolated that one part of the group. I'm going to duplicate that shape so that I can make some fire coming out of my engine. So obviously I need to change the color to resemble fire. And then I need to send this behind this shape. If I right click, arrange, and send all the way to the back, it's only going to go behind this one shape because I'm in isolation mode. If I was not in isolation mode, it would go behind the background because that is also a shape. So when you're trying to do something like this, make sure you're using isolation mode. And now that it's behind this one, I can duplicate it again. And then I want it to look a little bit more like fire. So I'm going to switch my fill and my stroke, which is Shift X. And now I've got something that kind of looks like cartoon fire, right? Now, I'm still in isolation mode, and the way that I would exit that is by double clicking anywhere in the gray space. So if I double click over here, then it turns back into my normal artboard. And if I move my rocket, now that fire is part of the group because I added it during isolation mode. So let's go ahead and copy those and put them on the other two. So if I zoom in, double click, and now I can select these two shapes by holding Shift and selecting both of them. I'm going to duplicate them the same way. So I'm going to hold Alt and drag them. And then I'm going to rotate them the same way. And now I need to send it behind. So again, I'm going to right click, arrange, send to the back, and then repeat. Hold Alt, drag, rotate, or put it where it needs to go, and then it's already behind. So that is the basics of creating with shapes in Illustrator. So you're going to spend some time not only doing what I did, but also adding your own details. And then when it's time to turn it in, you need to both file, save as a cloud document. I'll click on my period number for graphic design folder and press save. So that will save the document as an Illustrator file. And then you're also going to file export as. You're going to export as a PNG. You're going to make sure the title is your last name, underscore, and then the title of the project, which would be Spaceship. And we're also going to make sure we click Use Artboards. Now that we've done that, we can click Export. And then I also want to change the resolution to be at least medium. And you'll notice that it only gets the parts of my image that are inside of my artboard because I clicked Use Artboard. Now I'm going to say OK. And that image that I just exported is the image that I will upload to the Google Classroom. So when you're ready to upload to the Google Classroom, you must submit a PNG and not an Illustrator file. Hopefully this was a good introduction, and I will see you guys next time.